I welcome you to the session of the French-ANZ Business Days 2020, organised by the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce, and this year's theme on infrastructure and industrial projects. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we're meeting today and pay my respect to their elders, past and present. I extend that respect to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people here today. In the organisation of this session and this conference, I'd like to thank the French-Australian Chamber of Commerce for their organisation and leadership in arranging this conference. I'd like to also thank Schneider Electric for their support as naming rights for the forum. And I'd like to thank the French Embassy, Austrade, and sponsors for their support throughout. This session is entitled Hub Precinct Strategy, How to Repurpose Public Spaces and Services. My name is James Hayter. I'm Professor in the School of Architecture and the Built Environment at the University of Adelaide. My experience and interest is particularly with the repurposing of post-industrial inner city brownfield sites. My company, Oxygen, is currently helping the South Australian Government in redeveloping the Tonsley Innovation Precinct, which is the former Mitsubishi car manufacturing site in Australia, and also at Lot 14, which is the former Royal Adelaide Hospital site in the Adelaide CBD, and now home to many businesses, including the Australian Space Agency. Both of these projects are complex sites that are incubators in South Australia, and they drive innovation, employment, and new technologies on a global scale. I very much look forward to moderating the session and hearing from our speakers. This session focuses on hub precinct strategies and how to repurpose public spaces and services. We're very fortunate to have four dynamic and engaging industry executives to join us. We have Keith Miller, who's the Sales Director, Digital Buildings for Schneider Electric. We have Anna Quillinan, the Director of Development Delivery of Angers. We've got Chris Hannaford, who works at the City of Prospect in South Australia and has been responsible for their smart city status, which he'll talk to us about. And then we have Greg Duro, who's the Managing Director of Easy Ride. We'll now begin this session with a roundtable presentation from our speakers, followed by a roundtable discussion between ourselves. At the conclusion of the discussion, we'll have a question and answer session, which will be live. Please also contribute to the question and answer chat on the side of the video. So to begin our forum, it's my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker in Keith Miller.
Thanks, James. Thank you very much. Look, we'll just start off, the last 7-8 months for everybody has been a very troubling and difficult time. I think everyone's been focused on this very present and clear global problem that we have right now, which is obviously the COVID-19, as well as this recession. And I guess that's the backdrop to where we're all sort of meeting digitally. And there's been a lot of change in the last 7-8 months. And I guess for some part, COVID's kind of accelerated that march towards digital. Everyone working remotely. It needs to be done in a secure way. It needs to be done in a sort of scalable way. So there's been some significant sort of global advances. But as we get through this, and we get to and we find the vaccine and we move on, and we look at the recession that we're in going, like every recession, let's hope it has a trough pretty quickly and we pull up pretty quickly out of it. We're still left with this, huge negativity out there, which is a problem that we all need to solve, and we've all been continuing to solve, which is largely that of climate change. And when we're talking about this particular subject, it's really linking the necessity of dealing with emissions and actually, marching towards a decarbonized future, and how, smart precincts, buildings, hubs, etc., can play their part in that. if you look at carbon emissions sort of globally, largely two major problems driven from fossil fuels. And that process itself, from digging it out the ground to burning it to turning the lights on in a building, is just fraught with inefficiencies. And I think we're all pretty clear on those. And where I sort of see the future sort of unfolding, particularly in this space, is actually looking at technology as the way that can enable that decarbonized future. If we look at if we do nothing, you're looking at 3, 4, 5 degree temperature changes. If we stick to Paris, maybe we're in the 3 to 4. But I think here at Schneider, we believe that we can really go beyond that. And that technology piece is the enabler to get that sustainable path. And when you break it down, there's probably two things that I was going to sort of talk about a little bit today, and I'm happy to sort of take some questions later on. And that's that, I guess, electricity 4.0 and the whole digitization of buildings and smart precincts, and how the actual data that we're actually sort of aiming to sort of get out of it is the path to I guess to success, and actually being able to provide better outcomes for tenants in a building, to be able to drive that more efficient use of space, to be able to help people harness their renewable powers, and really be able to help buildings get to that that decarbonized future. So very much looking forward to the panel discussion as we go ahead, and again, happy to take some questions at the end of this on some of these specific topics.
Thanks very much, Keith. Anna.
Thanks, James. Hi, everyone. Anna Quillinan, as James introduced me earlier, the Director of Delivery at French-ANZ, and part of the Better Cities team at Engie. And I wanted to quickly take you through our Better Cities program and give you a couple of examples of where we have repurposed some public space. Firstly, as Keith alluded to, we are equally very much on that transition path to a carbon neutral economy. We are very much driving net zero precincts because we believe in that transition. We're focused very much on cities, mostly because that's where we'll get the biggest bang for our buck. So if you look at the statistics around a city, they take up the smallest percentage of space globally, yet they house the largest population of people. We consume most of the energy in the world, and we also emit the most of the greenhouse gases globally. So if we're going to get real change, the focus needs to be at that city scale. Of course, when we're talking about cities as well, we also speak about those in terms of precincts. It could be a large city scale. It could be a small precinct within a city, a university, a hospital, a port, a military base. These are all referred to as cities in Engie language. But when we're looking at really repurposing a city or trying to improve how it operates, we don't just look at the energy and that transition to net zero. We're also looking at how it operates. How do people move in and around the city? How do they get in? How do they get out? Do they feel secure living in that city? Is the city resilient in terms of energy, water, and waste? And then we attack the problem in a couple of different ways. Now, the first one, or the first two, very much focused around energy, but how do we consume energy in a more optimal way? What is the sort of infrastructure that we can install to ensure that we are optimizing our energy source? We then decarbonise that energy source because, of course, that is critical to getting us to net zero. And then we really take a look at how the city operates and really take that 360 view of a city. A couple of examples I just wanted to run you through. The first one in the UK, you can see there a picture of the Rugeley Power Station, which was sort of northwest of London. This was formerly owned and operated by Engie, but as we went through our decarbonisation process ourselves, we shut down this power station and are now in the development or the redevelopment of this area. And one of the critical problems that the the country of England was facing at the time was a bit of a housing crisis. The population was growing at a greater rate than the housing stock was. So the intent behind this redevelopment was to provide housing to the local community, and the intent really was to make sure there was a really good spread of housing options available. So there is high density and medium density and low density housing contained in this planning phase. The precinct itself will be powered entirely off renewable energy. There is going to be hydrogen generation, and the hydrogen will power buses that will service the precinct. There will be schools, commercial and an industrial precinct. So really looking at the development of that 15-minute city, so where you can live, work and play in the same space. Another quick example is in France, the city of Angers, again southwest of Paris. This particular precinct within the city was really looking at propelling itself into that smart city world, and probably one of the key aspects of our development here is the integration, again, as Keith spoke to, using technology, is the integration of our smart city platform Livin, and that smart city platform will really operate as almost like a central control centre for the city. So it will manage traffic light signals to help control the flow of traffic around the city when an event is on, equally parking within the city, trying to direct people around to different aspects, different areas of the precinct to avoid congestion. Waste management will be controlled by this platform, which bins need to be collected on which days, which are full. And also other aspects around street lighting, etc. So really, again, another really innovative way to reinvent a city. And then finally, a bit of more of a local example in Springfield in Queensland, where we are partners with Springfield City to help them achieve their net zero ambitions. So here, the key driver for Springfield is their ambition is to be the world's greenest city, and they've got an ambition by 2038 to be producing more energy than they consume. So again, what's critical here is helping to build a city and to grow a city with all of those things in mind. So how do we make sure the city is well planned? How do we make sure people can get around the city in an efficient way? How can they get in and out of the city in an efficient way? But equally, how do we make sure there's enough infrastructure within a city so that you can live, work and play? And I think that's going to be one of the crucial outcomes of this epidemic that we're going through at the moment, and how our cities actually operate in the future.
That was fantastic. Thanks so much. Yeah, I want to hear so much more. That's been great. Thank you. Just now, close to where we are now, I'd like to introduce Chris. If you could tell us a little bit about some of the work you're doing in the city of Prospect.
Je m'appelle Chris Hannaford. I want to talk to you about 10 years of revitalisation, urban renewal and smart city development in the city of Prospect. Prospect is only 3 kilometres north of the city of Adelaide, but we've been doing a lot in the smart city space. So I'll just pop into my PowerPoint. In City Prospect, we've been doing 10 years of change to make an attractive urban environment. We've been focusing on how can we get both a stylish inner city metropolitan look and become a smart city. We've actually implemented a master plan on Prospect Road, and in 2010, we got a Main Street award for our Village Heart. And I'll just give you an example of what we used to look like. That's Prospect in the old days, and now with a mixture of NBN and upgrade of the main streets, we have also been able to produce a wide range of new apartments on the main street, where the vision was how can we create a Parisian style look and feel to our urban corridors, And we're actually quite close to achieving that. We expect by 2023, we will have achieved 900 new apartments on Prospect Road and Churchill Road. And we've also upgraded our town hall and rebuilt our civic centre and art gallery. So we've actually completely changed the city in the space of 10 years. This is an example of Prospect Road, and what we have done is created great cafe culture, created a great vibe, new cinemas, and more housing choice. Our side streets are still full of great character housing, but we have a fantastic main street with co-working spaces, with European style cafes, and all the shops you could actually want, but more in the boutique range. So Prospect Road has also got its own branding and digital marketing campaign. So we're the orange spot in the middle of the screen there. And what we say is we're actually close to everything. But in the middle of that area, we've got our innovation precinct, which has a gig city connection of between 1 and 10 gigabits a second upload and download. We've got 2 co-working spaces which are full and 2 more being developed. We've got Wi-Fi and a really good innovation ecosystem. But as you can see, we're close to the Adelaide Central Business District, which is number 2 there. We're close to the submarine base. We're also close to the defence precincts and the wineries. So it's really quite a good place to set up a business. What are we doing about, what's our next step from being a smart city? Our next step is really developing a French quarter. And we see the French community, French businesses as a great way of propelling the Prospect story further. And we are not only doing it because we love French culture and French food, but we also recognise the submarine contract and the French businesses that come with that are very important to engage. So we're working on a strategy that it has residential housing, attracting workers, cultural events, and of course, business attraction. So the next driver will be our French Quarter Roundtable, which is a collaborative approach with some of these companies and some of these people. But we were just showing La French Tech around our co-working spaces. So that's the Prospect story. It's taken 10 years, but we've got a fantastic result.
Chris, thanks very much. That's a great local example of, I think, what we're going to be talking about in this session. Just finally, if I could introduce Greg to just tell us a little bit about his interests and where he's coming from.
Thanks very much, James. So I'd like to talk a bit about the transport component and how autonomous vehicle technology will impact urban design and essentially our cities of the future. So just to give you a bit of context about what we do at EasyMile, well, we firmly believe that shared autonomy is the future of mobility. Our flagship product is a fully electric autonomous shuttle that you can see in the middle of the screen here, which we typically deploy to complement the existing public transit network and bridge the first mile, last mile gap and provide new mobility solution as well. We're not a vehicle manufacturer and we're not a transit operator. We're really a tech company. And our strategy is to partner with automotive manufacturers and OEM who would provide the vehicle and the platform, And as EasyMile, we would provide our full stack driverless solution to make this platform autonomous. I think that, something that's really integral, an integral part of our mission, and mission for other shared new mobilities, it's really to deliver on the promises of this new transport mode, and something that is really core to the value proposition is providing some mobility solution that will eventually lead to a better usage of public space. As Anna mentioned earlier in her presentation, by 2050, we'll have 70% of the world's population living in cities. Currently, we've got more than 50% of the world's population living in cities. And that comes with a really heavy price tag, a really heavy cost in terms of congestion, pollution, and scarcity of space as well. In Australia, for congestion, we're talking about a cost of about 20 billion per year, which is expected to double by 2031 if everything remains equal and we don't do anything to try to curb it. And some studies have shown that a broad adoption of shared driverless vehicle could reduce traffic up to 80% and tailpipe emission as well. And there's something that the driverless vehicle will bring, like a better control of the flow of traffic as well, because as human drivers, we're not, as humans, we're not very good drivers. And we have a typical driving style with a lot of stop and go. And if you can remove the stop and go, you're going to make the flow of traffic a lot more efficient and reduce congestion as well. So I'll just go through this really quickly. I think that the main thing that I want you to take from this slide is that driverless vehicle is no longer a pie in the sky scenario. The future is now. And although there's still some areas for improvement in terms of the regulations, in terms of technology, the technology and the vehicles have reached a level of maturity that enable them to be deployed on open road in a mixed traffic environment, which is a huge feat from an engineering perspective. So we've been running projects in Australia to try and bring solutions to first mile and last mile gap, or provide also new transport solution in regional areas as well. Well, there's a very big issue when it comes to public transportation, which is inexistent. So as you can see, we've had projects in Queensland, New South Wales, South Australia, Northern Territory a few years ago. So again, we're not talking about the future, we're really talking about the now. And the challenge is that, in my mind, autonomous vehicle and urban design can solve together. This challenge is multifold. So firstly, public car parking spaces will eventually run out. And I'm well placed to know that because my background is in car sharing. And private vehicles and private fleet of vehicle is probably one of the grossest misallocation of assets that you can think of. And that also leads to a very big misuse of public land. I mean, we're excavating land at the tune of billions and billions of dollars every year to create car parking where we're going to put assets like private cars in it that are used like less than 10% of time in average. It just doesn't make any sense at all. And if we can reduce the amount of space that we need for car parks, that can lead to redesign of urban spaces and public land and more space for other type of transport and other lifestyle activities as well. Secondly, we've got a very well documented and notorious love affair with car ownership, private car ownership in Australia. We've got big roads, we've got a strong car culture. In terms of stats, we're looking at about 1.8 cars in average per household and 730 cars per thousand. In terms of cars per capita, we're number 8 in terms of the countries with the most cars per capita, which is not a great fit and not a position that we want to be in. So I guess the idea is, if we can provide alternative mode of transport for people to reduce the amount of cars that they have, we will need less road, we will need less parking space, there will be less congestion and less pollution as well. So to me, this is really critical to the value proposition of autonomous vehicles. And finally, there's a real gap in first mile and last mile links. So, I think that the urban sprawl that we've seen in most Australian capital cities have created a lot of transport black spot and a real phenomenon of transport poverty and at times forced car ownership. People in the outer suburbs of our capital cities have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 cars because they simply don't have the choice. Even if they have a transport hub in the vicinity, they still have to drive their car to reach the transport hub because it's well beyond the 500 meters recommended distance that will make it such that people will use their car less and be more inclined to use public transport. So it's very important that we also that we're being able to feed the public transport network with new solutions. To finish, I just want to talk you through a case study in Europe, which to me is a real blueprint on the future of autonomous vehicle deployment, but also a great example of how you can integrate urban design and autonomous vehicle in a master plan community. A bit of background, we're looking at the Precinct, the master plan development of Barkarby, which is in the greater Stockholm area. It's the largest development in Northern Europe. They're developing the Precinct block by block, which is very typical of master plan communities. And eventually they're expecting 40,000 residents in the community. What they have done, which I'd love to start seeing in Australia and New Zealand as well, is that they have developed this precinct with a very strong vision for public transport. They wanted to ingrain public transport behavior very early on in that community. They also wanted to put a lot of pressure on private car ownership. And the way they have done that, which is an incredible lever from a master plan community developer perspective, is they've reduced the number of car park per dwellings. I think we're talking about 1 car park per 3 dwellings in the city of Barkarby. And then they put the government, the regulations, the transport operator, the developer around the same table, and they decided to provide transport and mobility in a way that is extremely different than what we've seen today. They created a new bus line to provide an internal transport that is entirely serviced by our autonomous shuttle. We've got a fleet of 4 shuttles, and it's supposed to move to 6 in the coming years. And this new line is servicing the community to bring people to the retail precinct and also bring them to the transport hub so that they can catch a train to go to the center of Stockholm, or they can just use the autonomous shuttle to basically live and work in the community. And you can see how a strong vision like that and the investment to back it up is creating is feeding the next step for innovation as well. In the next year, they're looking at bringing a 12-meter autonomous bus to bring an additional link to this transport network. And the results are already extremely promising. Satisfaction with traffic up to 72%. Public transport market share up to 67%. It is possible to move away from private fleet of cars. To finish, I think that a video speaks a million words. So rather than me keep talking about it, I'll just play this short video. It's only a minute and a half, and it shows a delegation of Australian transport officials who visited the site of Barkarby last year, so you can really see the service.
In the Swedish satellite city of Barkarby, these autonomous minibuses have become a regular sight on the streets.
That is the idea of the city of Barkarby, to be something new, something different, something smarter.
It's the world's first autonomous bus line to run in regular traffic, and a delegation of senior Australian transport officials travelled to see the technology in action.
You just forgot the other traffic was there, you felt confident and comfortable, and it was a really good experience.
The system has been running since October last year, connecting homes and businesses to the main transport interchange, with a safety pilot on board to take control if required. It isn't perfect, but operators say the biggest challenge is not the technology.
Human beings not following legislations. That would be the most critical thing. People parking in the wrong place.
The next phase of this project will be the rollout of full-size buses, capable of carrying up to 80 passengers and travelling at faster speeds. Those buses are expected to be launched in around 12 months' time.
There will be more dedicated lanes. So in that case it's a little bit simpler because you can create a corridor for the buses.
Sweden is writing a roadmap many other countries are expected to follow. In Barkarby, Andrew Lund, 9 News.
And that's me. I hope you enjoyed the video talking about those pesky human drivers. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions in the discussion panel.
Yeah. Thanks. Thanks so much, Greg. That was fascinating. So just what 4 speakers have done is they outlined some of the pieces that will influence the planning and the design of the making, the retrofitting of our urban environments. Now, I'd like to move now into a roundtable discussion where I hope we'll be able to expand on some of these initial ideas and hear more of your thoughts, which so far have been so fascinating. Just to get the ball rolling, Keith, could I ask you a question? So it's a fairly open and general one, but can you tell us more about how you think technology can enable success? So we talk about the use of open data. Can you tell us a little bit about what open means to us?
Yeah, sure. So taking it back up a second, we go, all right, so if we believe that technology is the enabler, and we're sort of saying that the 2 big things that we need right now is for that electricity 4.0, the moving away from fossil fuels to renewables, getting our renewables on rooftop, getting that prosumer sort of model. We're really focusing in on that sort of pathway to decarbonisation. So that's the first path. In parallel with that is that whole digitization. And if you think about when we drill down, what that actually means is a very human-centric, buildings and places designed for us, for human beings, rather than just the building in itself. And it needs to be resilient. It needs to be cyber secure, and all these sort of good things that we all sort of know about. But the key piece to me really is you've got to have the right sort of architecture in the first place. And before we even get to the data, you've got to make sure that, I guess, that there's a solid level of, the right sort of connected products. And as we move more and more to the edge and smart edge control, that, that they're robust products, and if there's apps and analytics running in the background, that they're actually able to get access to the data. And that the pieces, a lot of people talk about, data is the new oil. And you go, yeah, it is, but if you think about oil in its most basic form, it's crude. It needs processing, and it needs actually something to be done to it. And we're focusing in on is that openness piece of the data going. Open means a lot of different things to many different sort of people, but what we're trying to delve into is going from an open technology point of view. It's got to have open protocols so they can all talk to each other. You've got to have access to open data that's actually, readable and is in context and can actually do something. So it's really drilling down into the weeds of making sure on any of these projects that when we're talking about open, we can get all the way down to nice open metadata that provides context and situational information that can actually bubble right up to the surface and actually do something meaningful for us in society. I hope that sort of answers along the meandering way on open.
But just let me ask you too, that we talk about industry 4.0 and we understand that, and you talk about electricity 4.0. What do you mean by that?
Look, I guess if you think about sort of, there's been a lot of talk about industry 3.0, right? So we're all aware of that. So industry 3.0, maybe in the last 15, 20 years, buildings in themselves, as they were going through that sort of life cycle change, they'd change out various, things from an old pneumatic mechanical type thing to slightly smarter, so to an IT controlled device. But they were still segregated. They were kind of still standing on their own. It was part of a life cycle journey, and it definitely wasn't part of a more broad industry 4.0 digital transformation. Okay, so that's industrial transformation and how buildings are transformed. But if you think about everything that's coming in to power everything, for the best part, for a lot of period of time, it's just been fossil fuel led, and I think what we're starting to see, and very proudly so, is this global understanding that renewables play a huge part of the future. They are the future, and as we sort of move towards that, we're sort of realizing that yes, we've got this lovely digital focus and digitization of buildings, but we also need to have a good hard look at the electrification process, and actually how do we manage this electricity? How do we manage the demand? How do we, looking at buildings that are actually not going to just be using power, but actually producing it as well, where you've got this lovely balance of, this prosumer, where they're producing and consuming. So I think that, digital is one thing, absolutely, but we've also got to really focus in on this, electricity 4.0, and actually really understanding the digital controls that we need to actually control the electric environment. So that's what I mean by electricity 4.0.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. So Anna, can I move to you? So Keith talked about a decarbonised world and how it needs to be digitised and how it needs to be connected. So you're working on projects in Australia and overseas where you are integrating infrastructure, services and digital solutions for net zero outcomes from that. Can you talk to us a little bit more about some of the ways that you've gone about achieving it and what you think some of the hurdles are that are stopping us being even more rapid in our deployment?
Yeah, thank you, James. It's a really good question, and I think the answer is that there's no one size fits all. Of course, every problem, every city, every precinct has its own challenges, and the first step really that we like to look at is setting down, I suppose, the current state, comparing it to the vision, and then detailing out a roadmap of how to get there. And yes, the integration of infrastructure and digital is absolutely critical, and I echo Keith's comments there about the requirement for data to be open. It's absolutely critical. I think one of the key aspects of what we're finding is we have a lot of solutions in our toolkit, of course, as do Schneider and many other companies around the world. But we're going to need to integrate so many different solutions to get here. So it's a really complex problem to solve. And being able to integrate, multiple solutions from various different people, I think is absolutely the key. We need a really strong mix of renewable energy that does include both electricity and, I think, in our situation in Australia, gas as well. Renewable gas, so hydrogen and biogas and those sorts of things. I think there's a place for all of that technology in helping us get to our net zero solutions. And equally with data, there's no one out there that has the single answer. We all need to work together and integrate our solutions together. So, that's challenging in itself, being able to try and source the best solutions from around the place and get them to work and operate together in harmony. But I think, critically when we start out with a project and start looking at a city, we do like to view that current state, and we have a bit of a mechanism to do that. It's called a 360 city scan, and we really do take that 360 view of how the city works. So we go out into the community, we speak to the residents within the community that live there, the people that go there to work, people that run the city, people, that various different aspects of the community that makes that city work, and we get their perspectives on, how does it operate in terms of mobility, what would they like to see in the future. And I think that really helps us bed down, that current state and help draw the line between current and future.
Anna, that's so interesting. You gave us an example of an international city where it's a smart city which is starting off from scratch as a greenfield site. How hard is it to retrofit our existing cities back to being the same aspirations that you're talking about?
Well, look, I think maybe you can ask me that in a few years, James. We're still working on it, but I think, look, the greenfield has its own challenges as well. It does require a lot of planning, but yeah, you get stuck into something that's brownfield. When you think about integrating, Greg's autonomous vehicles, have we planned the city to allow autonomous vehicles to travel? What sort of things do we need to put in place? So yeah, it's definitely a lot tougher. It does require another level of of effort. It's a different challenge, a different problem to solve, but it can be done. I think that the technology that we have today, the IoT devices and the solutions that are in place allow us to get there. But it's absolutely work in progress.
Yeah, no, thanks so much. That's a good segue on to you, Chris. So as one of the managers in charge of creating this new French Quarter for the city of Prospect, is that you are looking to retrofit an existing neighbourhood. It's helped by urban consolidation and a new flow of economy into our cities, CBD areas and the inner city areas. Can you talk to us just a little bit more about your French Quarter strategy, which sounds so evocative and so good? Can you tell us just what are some of the challenges that you've come across in getting these ideas across, and how you've been able particularly to integrate some of the ideas that Anna and Keith have talked about in terms of a digital economy into it?
Thank you, James. It's really been a progression, because as far as being a smart city, having a lot of urban renewal, apartments, we're actually already there. We've been nominated and won 7 times out of the last 9 years. We've been in the top 21 intelligent communities in the world through the Intelligent Community Forum, which is an international organisation. So we kind of feel like we're already there. Our actual citizens really love Prospect, because we've actually said you can have the side streets, your leafy green streets, your villas, your bluestone, sandstone villas, and we'll do those houseman-like urban corridors. So we really said, well, what's the next part of the story? And happens to be a very large submarine contract happening just down the road. Schneider Electrics are just about 3 k's up the road, and we're just thinking, why don't we be a part of that? And also, we've got a very artistic community, a very creative community, and they've been very accepting of the urban changes that have happened and have jumped in on those changes. So it is really the next step. And I would actually say it hasn't been hard at all. It's been really, really good, because the local French community, Fachi, Business France, some of our local French businesses, Renault are just on Main North Road, and we've got Le Ducoq, who are a charcuterie just down the road. They have just said, wow, you've got a French strategy, let's all work together. So we have this French Quarter round table. So we share ideas, and we've basically put a little bit of money on the table. And for instance, we've got a creperie being developed in the front of our town hall. We're hoping to get, I think it's a Breton crepes. We're just signing the deal with him tomorrow. We're also looking at a wine bar in the basement, or a gin bar in the basement of our town hall. So we can actually create that French Quarter relatively easily. We get a few more French restaurants, and by actually putting a small amount of money out there for a Welcome Prospect program, starting a startups program, collaborating with French tech. Business France seem to be great people. We've only just really started to talk with them, but everybody's coming on board, and I can actually feel like I've been involved in a lot of strategies. We did creating a arts quarter in Adelaide many years ago with James. But I feel like this one of creating a French Quarter it's the right strategy at the right time in the right place, because we do have so many French people coming in, well supported by the French government, and we're trying to create a home for them, acknowledging that there's many other places. I mean, we're not the only place in Adelaide that likes French people, but we think that we can create that quarter and we can create a special feel here.
That's fantastic, Chris. This bottom-up approach that you're talking about is working, and you can see Prospect Road being transformed as we speak. And I think it's this high-level approach and this bottoms-up approach which has got the potential to transform our city. Yeah.
One thing that we're actually doing, our smart city model, Anna, might be across the Intelligent Community Forum model, which is really citizen-centric. So we have been in the past a little bit guilty of getting a lot of new technology, throwing Wi-Fi on the street and everything like that. What we're now doing is making sure that our LoRaWAN can be used by the local community gardens. And that's harder to do, but that will give longevity to the Smart Cities initiative. So we are doing a bottom-up approach on a whole range of initiatives.
Yeah. Thanks, Chris. So, Greg, if I could come to you. Look, I'm so impressed you've never owned a car. I think that's fantastic, and it displays your sort of passion for what you talk about. So you're an expert within Australia and New Zealand on mobility and urban transportation, and you're a leading advocate on driverless technology. Can you talk to us just a little bit more about how you think AV technology can enable the redesign of our urban places and urban spaces, and what opportunities you see for this technology to change the way that urban planners, urban designers like me can design our cities of the future?
Sure. Thanks, James. To me,
simple question for you, Greg.
Yeah. I'll tackle them one by one. So, firstly, regarding the opportunities in terms of enabling a redesign of urban spaces, to me, it's really about the transport modal shift that shared AV mobility solutions can bring, from private car ownership to shared transport, which will eventually impact the requirements for roads and car parks and the way we use space. To be fair, I think as an AV provider, we just bring one piece of the puzzle. As Anna mentioned earlier, you need a real holistic transport strategy, a vision, and understand what you need to get there. And you'd have to pair autonomous vehicle solutions with micromobility, like e-scooters, carpooling, car sharing, and on-demand transport, and so on. And I think that we shouldn't let the crisis go to waste, right? The pandemic created a great opportunity to have this conversation and act on it, because we're going to work from home much more than we've been used to. And it was always meant to happen, but it's happened a whole lot faster than we expected. And commercial tenancy is gonna have to ask some very big questions. So let's say you live in your outer suburb master plan community in the Melbourne West. Do you still want a house with a double garage, another 3 parking spaces at the front? Or would you prefer to have more space in your home to have a home office? Would you prefer to have more living space? So, to me, that's where we need to have this conversation at design and planning space, so that we don't start doing the things the way we've been doing them for 100 years. And in terms of I think, this project will pay for themselves in terms of the future economic value and the land uplift. There's a plethora of studies showing how transport access will increase the value of the land and housing, and that translates into higher government revenues. So these solutions will pay for themselves. So to me, the faster we accelerate the development of these new mobility solutions, and the better off we'll be. And I think that's eventually going to lead to a new sharing of public space and better, healthier cities. In terms of opportunities, look, to me, master plan communities in Australia are really in the box seats to take advantage of the driverless revolution. Flagship MPC like Springfield that we talked a bit about earlier, and a number of developments in Southeast Queensland, which is the fastest growth population corridor in Australia currently. That's really an ideal environment for this technology, especially if we can get in at design stage. And the reason for that is that they're starting, this master plan development are starting from a blank canvas. And we also have a significant part of the resident population that live and works locally. And these sustainable communities are often based on a series of pillars like education, commercial, lifestyle, and residential, which creates a large area hosting a collection of different precincts, leading to a number of transport challenges which cannot be addressed with traditional public transport. So I think, and back to what Keith was saying, I think we've learned today the modern city is one that will be smart and connected, but not just from a data perspective, also from a truly physical level, where we need to move people seamlessly from A to B, using the full, multimodal array of options. So to me, I think, master plan communities can lead the way by delivering on their transport vision using this kind of technology.
Thanks, Greg. So there's a whole community of professionals and people who are interested in it who need to be brought together to integrate the solutions we're talking about. The projects that we work on, I'm only too well aware about how difficult it is, so that we have 10 different cells of passionate people arguing for a case, but it's only when you can get them together and there's a political will to bring them together. And I think, in a sense, Chris has explained one opportunity that's happened, and this bottom-up approach of gradually nibbling away at it, but then you still have major economic drivers which are giving the incentive to do it, that gives us hope to move forward. Just as a sort of a final question to you, Greg, is why don't you think that there's been this great uptake on it? I mean, the theory's right and the passion's there, and we've got the technology, as you've rightly pointed out, to be there. Why have we been, why haven't we achieved these application of the technology to be able to change the way that we're actually designing and managing our cities? Well, what's been the major block?
Yeah, and look, there's no lack of strong use cases for this technology in the region, in Australia and New Zealand. And if we look out to countries like Sweden, like Germany, like the US or Singapore, they're really pushing ahead with this. I think that in Australia, the very way that the first wave of autonomous vehicle trials were built is part of the reason why we have not moved into the next gear in terms of large-scale deployment. So these projects were built as pilots with a limited shelf life, with no option to turn them into commercial services, even if we were to demonstrate, and bring a solution to the problem. So I think we're really missing that long-term vision and the investment that comes with it to back it up. According to the latest annual report from KPMG, every year they rank the countries by the index of readiness for autonomous vehicle technology. And unsurprisingly, Australia is number one for AV regulations. We've got an amazing framework, so the legislative size has been patted down to bed. But in overall ranking, we're number 15, and I think it's not good enough. And if we don't do anything, we will be in a position where we're going to be one more time a net importer and a net buyer of technology. So I think we've got a chance to not let that happen, and then we should jump on it.
Thanks, Greg. Just as a final word, Anna, perhaps in your experience, you've given us the examples of the master plan communities. I think they work. Do you think this is possible? Do you think there is a way to accelerate this sort of integration between the different players so that we can also look at our existing cities and look to see how we can move the technology forward, not just in master plan communities?
Oh, look, I think there is. I think there are enough actors in this space. You know, Greg's a perfect example. You know, walking the talk, and really, you know, driving, you know, his strategy. It's amazing, and I think there's enough people. There's a real wave, and even if you just look at the action against climate change as an example, there's a wave globally now. And no longer are we waiting for governments to adjust their policies. We've got people going out there and doing it themselves. So, yeah, I'm a glass half full kind of girl, and so I do think we can, because I think we've got enough amazing people and enough thought and ingenuity. I think one of the critical things that we need to keep doing, though, is to test with the users. So test with the people who are actually using this technology, this infrastructure, and making sure that we're actually delivering the products that they're going to use, because that's the critical piece. If we can install all the fancy infrastructure we like, but if people don't like it, they're not going to use it. So I think that's a key aspect to what we need to do to accelerate.
Thanks so much, Anna. All right, so this session we've explored the hub precinct strategies, and we've heard from our speakers how to repurpose urban spaces and services. Your insights have been amazing. Thank you so much for participating. So Keith, Anna, Chris and Greg, thank you for sharing your thoughts and your case studies, your examples. I think we've had a fantastic range, looking from bottoms up to technology, to use of data, master plan communities. I think the information that you've put across and you've been able to share with us has been fantastic, and I thank you for that. So on behalf of everyone attending this forum, thank you for your thoughts, your enthusiasm, for sharing your successes and your leadership in this field. What we would like to do now is to move into our last segment of the session, which is a Q&A session. I'd invite the audience to stay with us and join us for the live Q&A session. Thanks very much for your speakers, and we look forward also to this next session. Thanks very much.
Thank you.